How is everybody today? Happy Monday. I am certainly happy to be back, and I got my hair cut. I am feeling cute. So, no hat today. I actually did my hair. Anyhow, welcome back. We are in such an interesting place in the work right now, aren't we? I'm kind of amazed because it just feels like there was a lot of ramping up. There was a lot of hanging out in the basement. There was a lot of, nonsense going on, quite frankly, as I was just kind of in here working through my stuff. But then I decided to get a little bit more serious, didn't I? And I'm like, okay, that's been fun. It's go time. We do not have time to mess around. And that's when I immediately moved to asking the universe, show me the end of this process. Show me the end. I want to stop and highlight that because that process of critical thinking and taking your time to develop the perfect question for what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Never, ever underestimate the power of the correctly worded question. That will shortchange the time, energy, and effort required to get from point A to point B, right? Because where were we in the work? We were like, okay, just came up out of the basement, looking at my new landscape of understanding in the daylight. What does that look like? And I'm like, oh, that's where we're headed, right? North Star, joy. What does that look like? Let's go there, right? And it wasn't in the being focused in kind of where we were, but rather, again, the end goal and having that North Star identified as joy. I'm like, oh, let's just screw this. Let's just jump to joy. Remember? And I was saying that, if we could only do that, but unfortunately, you're human. So anyhow, I asked that question. I said, oh, dear universe, show me the end. Show me where this is all headed. And I immediately understood where we're trying to get to. Doesn't mean that I can accomplish it just yet. But having a clear understanding of the goal, that shortens my process from where I am to that by quite a bit. Within a day, I was experiencing being in the seat of joy, right? And I was like, oh, this is what everyone's talking about. That was the moment. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I kind of knew we were heading here. Because, see, this is the thing. I understand a lot of these concepts, and I have dealt with and, delved into this work my entire adult life. But, I've also kind of been lazy just hanging out on the outside. I'm like, yeah, I get the concepts, I'm good. But meanwhile, I'm still just, a giant asshole. But I get the concept. And that's the lazy man's work, approach to the work. Right? I get the concept, but yeah, do I have to really integrate all of that? Do I really have to be happy? Can I just, sit in the back row and eat popcorn and judge people from a distance? That seems like way more fun. Right? And that's where I've been living, right? I understand the concepts. I understand how this kind of works. But I hadn't really done the work on myself, right? Because look at where I was resonating with, right? I was resonating with a lot of fear, a lot of judgment, a lot of angst, a lot of, what's the opposite of trust? Fear? Right? Because you can't live in fear and in trust at the same time. So I found the resonance of joy. And I'm like, oh, like, this is feeling pretty good. Like, I get what the big deal is all about, right? Of why we would want to be that person. Of why we would want to count ourselves amongst the highly evolved. Despite my opinions about them. Right? And so I actually kind of wanted to check myself. Where am I in the work now that I have seen the goal, tasted the goal? Because I feel like I'm in a whole new landscape of my understanding, am I not? Like, it's changed so much in a week when we got up out of the basement, and I was like, okay, this is what the landscape of my understanding looks like in the daylight. And then we went up into the Seat of Joy, like another story up, and I was like, oh, I completely don't have any reference for this. Because now I'm not just looking at the landscape of my understanding in the daylight, I'm looking at it under the radiance of joy. I'm like, I don't know what to do up here. Back down. Too fast, too much. Let's go to the mall and swear at some people. That'll fix it. Anyhow. Right? Because I have to check in and of myself where I am in the work. And if we know that the goal is joy, am I radiating with joy? Or, some other version of that? Like, where am I in relation to that? What I found was, and this was like really surprising to me, that when you just jump to the end, when you just jump to joy, when you just are like, okay, I'm just going to fully step into trust, because that's ultimately, right? The resonance of joy is 1,000% trust, right? If I just move to that resonance and I practice and practice and practice, knowing that when I am trying to find center, all I have to do is adopt the energy of trust. And you're there. Just that easy, just that fast. And there didn't have to be 1,000 steps on my way from out of the basement to joy, like I thought there was going to be. I was like, oh, really? You can just go to the end without having to do those 1,000 steps in order to get there? When I found that I was vibing with and inhabiting joy completely and wholly, right? When I found that place, I got it. Quite frankly. Like, I understand, how that, right, inhabitation of that energy of ourselves, right? And that light buoyancy, right, is what we need in order to, be on top of the troubles of the world, right? And to understand that that is the mandate. Oh my gosh. Like, all we have to do is be in joy? Like, okay, that seems like not work. That seems like going on vacation. That seems like a good time, right? And it's so crazy because we live in this Western world where, just going on vacation and work are, But in here, that is the work. Being on vacation. Abandoning care. Abandoning worry. To be centered in self and understand that to fight anything is to fight alignment. When we are more fully centered in self, and that's why I so welcome this self-centered society that we live in, right? Because that self-centeredness, that egoic seeking of attention that everybody wants, online, everybody seeking that, is a good sign. That is a good sign to me, right? Because these are all these people who are being self-centered and demonstrating to the world that they have that within themselves to get centered in self, right? Because it's the same thing. It's the same energy registration, only applied differently, right? So that gives me great joy when I see all of that, right? And everybody participating in their own lives and creating a story online where they are the central character and the hero of their journey. Because it's got to start there, right? In the belief that you're worth that story and creating that story for you. Because what we're doing is creating joy, right? And happiness. And restoring the planet to that vibration. That's what God intended. That's heaven on earth, right? And that's what we're trying to create with the new earth, where things are assessed through the lens of love. That's it, right? Simple. I said simple and not easy. Right? Because to stay in that vibration, which then tunes to Mother Earth, Gaia, whatever you want to call it, right? And that we tune into the station of what is and Mother Earth, right? To lift her up. Oh my gosh, like for all of us to start adopting that vibration and living in joy and being on vacation and not being torn up and angsty and riddled with this stuff. In math, like one of my favorite things in math was when I was in like elementary school and they taught you how to check your work. That like blew my mind. I love that concept so much. And so I'll often like do an equation. And again, I know like when I'm doing like this energy work in terms of understanding and like putting things together and doing all that, to check my work, there are many different ways to do that, right? Same way to check your work in a math equation, right? You can rework the numbers, and rather than doing it by times, you divide, or you can check that the numbers still add up to the numbers within the equation, right? Anyhow, I love that concept. And so I decided to check my work, right? As far as where I've been on this journey. So, I decided to go back and watch a few old videos. Woo, mama. And while I wasn't always impressed with who I was back then, which is kind of the whole point of this, right? Imagine I'm doing all this and I just never evolve. Exactly the same. Anyhow, I was checking my work and I was seeing who I was being just a few months ago compared to how I'm being today. And I was watching some of my old videos and I was like, what the hell is this shit? Oh my God. Woo. Right? Like I do. And so I was like, what the hell is this shit? Because seriously, after 9 minutes of watching this one video, I had to turn it off. I'm like, right? The energy was, because it was just me standing up there ranting, going on about, how horrible these people are and like how much more of the work these people need and right? And I went for a drive and then I came back and I decided I'm like, okay, I'm going to commit to this. I mean, like if I'm expecting other people to watch this, I should probably be able to sit through it as well. Right? So I'm like, okay, I need to commit to this. I need to watch who I've been, for real. Because when we are seeking to get better at something, our willingness to take in the honesty of what we're doing will be the ratio in how quickly we move forward. So you have to be willing to check your ego at the door, right? And be willing to admit that you are terrible. Or at least need work, right? And so I got through that video and I was like, okay, wow. Like if I'm watching the energy signature of myself in that video, right? And because again, in order for me to accomplish this, I kind of have to study myself, study my energy signature, study what it is that I'm doing, what it is that I'm sending downstream. So for me to be an audience member, I was checking the energy registration of what I was doing. Right? And there was some parts where I was like, oh, this is actually really good. Sometimes I say some things and I'm like, oh, that actually sounds smart. Right? And I'm checking it, and some of it's really good. It's hitting those high points that I really want to, be engaged in here, right? It's hitting those, and I'm checking those boxes. But then there's other times the energy signature dipped into the basement. And I'm standing there telling you about things that I don't care for, or things that I have opinions about, or things that I think could be better. It's kind of a turnoff. Right? Who wants to be around somebody who's just yelling? Nobody. That's not a fun experience. So it was really interesting, and what I came to is the line between those two things. When I'm hitting the high points and I'm feeling like I'm getting this thing done the way that I want to, in terms of talking about higher principles, higher thinking, conscious living, all of those things. But then when I get into the basement, what's the difference? Where am I speaking from? That's the difference. And when I'm speaking from up here, my ego, my mind, what I think, my opinions, it's a real drag and not fun. But when I'm speaking from here, when I'm speaking from my heart center, from my heart consciousness, when I'm talking about how I'm feeling, right? And what we're working towards, rather than what we're working against. Therein lies the energy signature of something interesting. That's something people want to be engaged in, right? I'm not going to belabor the point, but I really want you to pay attention to that in your own life. Where are you talking about your thoughts versus your feelings? We have to abandon up here. It's just crazy town, right? And drop into our heart consciousness. If you want to change minds, speak from the heart, right? So that's what we're in here doing. And what we're doing in here is finding how we win, which is so crazy because we live in this world, right? And everything out there is going on. And we want to try and arrange and get involved in everything that's out there. And that's where we fall down. Remember before, I was saying it's a journey of going from what's out there, what's that, to what's that? What's that? Right? And so it's taking all of your brain power and refocusing it internally right? And you're just observing what's happening out there, but you're changing, checking, monitoring, and adjusting what's in here. Because what's out there only serves one purpose, and that's to inform you of what maybe needs to shift in here. Because if anything is off, if anything is feeling fearful or triggering or wrong, those are red flags. Ding, ding, ding. What did we say about red flags? That's where the learning is. That's where you are in the work. So we run to those red flags and we chase them down. And we're like, oh yeah, hey, what are you made of? You seem super painful, or I am extremely terrified of you. Let's check out and see what it's made of, right? Because when you get down to the bottom of it, what do you get to? Nothing. You get to one of two things, right? Either love or, a cry for love in terms of your own behavior. And that's all you get to. That's all there is. So it's switching to that internal world and abandoning the external. That's how we win. We get out of their game and we get into our game, right? The one where we call the shots, the one where we decide when we win. Because we can do this any way we want, and we can fill ourselves with as much joy as we possibly can each and every day. We can. And what if that was the only goal? Like, oh my gosh, like, it's so crazy to think about. But it also feels so good to abandon their hopes, their expectations, their needs, their opinions, right? And just adopt ourselves in our personal center, our serenity, our ability to abandon the fight. Right? Because if you're living in the fight, if the fight is still going on, you are fighting your own alignment. And when we're not in alignment, we're not doing the highest and best for our community, ourselves, our planet, right? And so it's returning to those things. It's returning to those things. I know I've said a lot of really big statements in here. As far as like unpacking some of those bigger things, as far as how we actually got to joy. I know that I was like, just, that's all there is love. And you're like, okay. And I'm going to unpack all of that. I'm going to unpack all of that and prove to you that in fact, that's all there is love. At least in terms of energy work. At least in terms of what we're talking about here, right? And then finding that way to be so selfish that you would forgive those who seek to take up space in your head and evict them, let them go. Be grateful for each and every traumatic event in our lives that has taken us to the basement of our own personal soul. Because it's in that we found new things, that we often found what we were looking for and answers to, who am I? Right? The evolution of this work, how we win, by being seated in alignment, by seated in joy, and seated in the soul. That's the goal. That's how we win, by feeling amazing and vibing with what is. Because Because what is, and again, I know I'm speaking in big terms here, and I'll clarify all this as we go on. I'm just getting the boulders out. We'll deal with the pebbles later. Right? To be on vacation, to feel amazing within ourselves, because fear is optional. And that's up to us. And that's the work that we do in here, right? It's how we, change your perspective and you change the world. Abandon the fight and return to what is. The fight lives in the past. We don't, right? We have to get back into today, right? And be grateful for and not worry about, oh my gosh, having to punish those who did something wrong, right? Being able to just let that go and be free and light and loving, right, for people that we encounter. Now, trust me, that doesn't change my boundaries, and I still have, a lot. But I'm looking forward to starting to unpack this new landscape of my understanding, right? That, it's like I have so much work to do now because I have leveled up twice within the last 2 weeks. And now I'm having to, really step back and look at it critically, whoa, how much of this in my landscape of understanding, now that I've already hit the goal, is actually necessary? Right? We talked about all those little pieces that we put in there to help us feel safe and secure, which is nothing more than a smokescreen. There's nothing there. There's nothing that we can do to affect how safe we feel or how safe we are. We just are. And so that illusion of safety is something that I deal with a lot, especially in the second book of my series. The books are really coming along. It's so fun. I will be finishing my first book in my second series, Handsome Devils. That's the one about Nikolai Tesla that I'm super excited about. Oh my gosh, there's so much good stuff in there. But this is what I'm the most excited about because I am setting up an epic war. But as a person who is pro-peace and not anti-war, and I have, on one side, the Nazis, the Catholics, and, the right-wing politics of Austria and their Freedom Party in the 1880s, which was very right-wing, very homophobic, very anti-immigrant, very, all the things that goes along with right-wing politics, right? That's just what it is. So, anyhow, what I'm most excited about that series is that I hope to demonstrate a new way of creating this war, right? Between all the effeminate boys who are running for their lives for fear of being lobotomized like they did back then to effeminate men, right? And how change can come about through this convergence rather than war. Because on the good side, they're all shamanic practitioners, right? The main character is teaching these young boys who they've either run away from their homes because they're terrified of, being lobotomized, or they've been rescued or they've just been thrown out from their, faith community onto the street. And so, the main character, Melvin Vaughn, goes around and finds all these boys and starts the school. Anyhow, they're all going to be shamanic practitioners, and it's going to be really interesting to see where I get to in terms of the apex of the... Sorry. Just give me a second. Between the apex of, the conflict and... the actual resolution, because as shamanic practitioners we don't fight, right? And so to take the fight out of a war is going to be super interesting, and I can't wait to to get into that a little bit more. Anyhow, sorry about that little moment of dystonia. Not a big deal. It just happened. So, I think that's where we are for right now. There's one more thing that I want to talk about in terms of the evolution and in terms of like what it does to those around you when you are yourself resonating from a higher place. It's another way of winning, right? Because it calls out their bad behavior even more when you're resonating with nothing but love and joy. Anyhow, let's not get there today. We'll go there another time. But thank you so much for today. I hope that you enjoyed that. I really appreciate it. And stick around. We got lots more exciting things to come. All right, talk to you soon. Bye.